Okay, so we are ready to get started. First, we'll have Selena Shands from Full Capacity Marketing. Selena, you can take it from here.
Okay, thanks so much, Veronica, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to, quote-unquote, see everyone on the webinar today, and we're very excited about the topic we have, which is building an effective outreach plan for adult education. I'm joined here today by Dr. Christine Bosworth, the CEO and co-founder of Business U, and I've asked Dr. B to come online because she's so great at chatting with folks during the webinar, and also to have her tell us a little bit about the next webinar on the 15th, and actually Business U is going to be doing that one, which is targeting employers. Today we're going to be looking at outreach plans for the adult educator. And this is really the first in many webinars that we'll be doing and posting up on the AEBG website. As a reminder, before we get into the agenda today, we did a kickoff webinar not too long ago about the proactive storytelling campaign that we are developing, and actually piggybacking off the national campaign called Educate and Elevate. And we've adapted this campaign for the state of California for the purpose of proactively telling our story to key influencers and also to our communities about all the great work we're doing in adult education and the efforts. And with this, we're also developing these series of webinars and toolkits to help you better tell your story more effectively for your regional consortia and for your individual organizations as well.
Lena, this is Neil.
Hi, Neil. You want to say hello to the group and just kick it off for us?
Okay, great. So welcome, everyone. This is Neil Kelly from the AEBG office. I'm really excited about today's webinar. In the old days, everybody would say adult education is the state's best-kept secret. Well, no longer, as we do this marketing and outreach and toolkits, we're no longer going to be a secret. So I'm really excited to see this many people on the call today, and I'm excited to see the products that Full Capacity Marketing and working with the field have developed. And so this is all going to be rolling out soon, and so I'll hand it back to Selena.
Oh, fantastic, Neil, and I love that positive attitude. We are not going to be the best-kept secret, and that is for sure. The whole idea is that we become very savvy about telling our story, and that takes some strategy behind it. And, you know, we have a lot of different target audiences that we work with in adult education, and so what we're doing in these webinars over the course of the next couple of months is breaking out those target audiences, because certainly one size does not fit all, and then giving you the tools to help you be effective within your area. So today we're going to talk about all the different adult education target audiences and the 30,000-foot view of what is a blueprint for a proactive outreach plan, so that you can take that blueprint and make it your own within your areas. And with that, we'll be sharing several case studies. Also talk about our campaign toolkit materials that will also support you for this storytelling effort. And then, of course, Dr. B will talk about the next webinar, which is around employer engagement. So now, just to sort of set the stage, you know, when you talk about an outreach plan, what is an outreach plan? And an outreach plan, it contains strategies to get the right message to the right audience through the right medium. And when you think about it, it can't really be a one-size-fits-all. The message to adult learners versus an employer message versus a policymaker is going to be very different, as is the communication mediums that they use. So, Veronica, if you could pull up the first poll, we're just going to sort of get kind of a baseline here on if your organization has a proactive, you know, outreach plan. If you have one, maybe you don't have one, or you have one that's in development. And then no vote, I'm assuming you're still learning about it. How's that? So again, this is really important because there are measures that we want to attach to the proactive outreach plan, and we'll get into those today. Those are different, of course, than what you report in for your performance metrics with AEBG. but your communications plan or your proactive outreach plan, however you want to frame it, will also have metrics behind it. So we want to make sure that whatever you are developing, you know how to track it and you can tweak it out, because it's certainly not one size fits all, nor is it a one and done where you create a plan and then it's actually finalized. So this looks like it's great timing for you, because the majority of you, about 73%, looks like you have one that's in development. So this webinar will certainly help you shape it. About 21% do not have it, and probably that's because you are wearing many different hats, and then about 10% do have one. Okay, great. Let's go to the next poll question. Go ahead and end that one, and let's bring up the next one. And this will apply for those of you who clicked it's in development or you have one. What are the audiences below that your organization proactively targets for outreach? And when we look at these are certainly all of the ones we think about adult education audience. The adult learners are probably the one that we most commonly want to attract for enrollments and bringing our strategic plans to fruition. But there are also employer targets who help us with work-based learning opportunities for placement, even for partnership on if we're doing sector strategies. Community-based organizations can certainly help us in partnering, and then the news media and legislators are definitely key influencers. And yes, it looks like the majority of you are looking at adult learners. So all of these other populations too are very important to moving our mission forward. As Neil said earlier, we want to not be the best kept secret, right? So in order to do that, we have to have a wide net for our messages and very tailored messages for each of these audiences that you see on the screen. Okay, we can close that out and get back into the PowerPoint, and all of you have access to the slide deck as well, which is really your blueprint. It's got a lot of information in it. So here's just a grid of the the different target audiences. So let's look now at the outreach plan, the blueprint, if you will. There are 4 steps that you need in developing an outreach plan. So one is know your market. That is, depending on if you're looking at adult education or employers or any of the ones we just talked about, you need to understand them from an objective data positioning. And so we'll talk about the types of data that you need to build an outreach plan. From the data is where you're going to develop and test tailored messages to make sure that they resonate with your audiences. I don't know if you know this fun fact, but research tells us that we see on average about 3,000 messages every single day when you take into account the billboards that you see on the freeway, the pop-up ads, television, radio, etc. 3,000. And so building a message that is tailored for your audience is critical, because you have to cut through the noise. And we certainly have a lot of noise out there. It's becoming more noisier, especially with social media. So how do you really develop the right message? And then once you have that, how do you deploy the message? What are your outreach strategies? Should you be using social media? What are the best methods to get that message out? And then, of course, measuring effectiveness. So these are all the topics that we're going to cover today, and I'm going to start with know your market. In building a plan, we tend to know a lot of demographic information about the adult learner. In fact, a lot of you, or most of you, when you build your 3-year strategic plans for AEBG, you have to define these, and there are a lot of sources that you use. So demographics is the who, the age, the gender, education level, and so forth. What we tend not to have, which is very important in building an outreach plan, is what's called psychographic information. And these are the motivators of your adult learners. What are their hobbies? What do they value? What motivates them to take an adult education class or go down a specific pathway? What kind of media consumption do they use? Spending habits, opinions, interests, all of these things that really help us to understand what would motivate an adult learner to engage with us, because at the end of the day, that's what we want them to do. Now, capturing psychographic information can be done in multitude of ways. You can survey your students, you can, deploy questionnaires, you can do this online. We found that personal interviews are a great way to do this with the students in focus groups. And sometimes because this data is not available on file, we'll actually go and interview the folks who are in contact with the students because they know them the best. So your transition specialists, your counselors will also have a lot of insight into what motivates an adult learner, as well as what are the barriers that they have from enrolling, participating with you within your special programs. Now, I'm going to give you a case study in this, but I just wanted to share with you some sample kind of questions that are psychographic in nature. So here was one, this was for community college. How important were each of the following factors in your decision to enroll college? This is one we did with a community college district. Is it to get a good job, to make more money? What are the things here? And we have them rate very important, important, somewhat, or not important at all. This is just a sample of a question. Now, why might we want to know this information? Well, because when we communicate with them, we might want to ask them a question, is what you're needing is a good job? Then we have some solutions for you. So it helps you to sort of tailor the messages accordingly. Here's some other ones from an adult learner population in adult schools that we did. So which of the following characteristics describe you? Are you family-oriented, social, responsible, competitive? Which of the following activities do you personally engage on a regular basis? Attend church, go to sporting events, watch TV, etc. One of the things you're going to find, and Dr. B says this all the time, we go where they go, right? So when you're going to a proactive outreach plan, where do they congregate? Where are they primarily spending their time? And if you can engage them in one of those activities where they're at, you're more than likely to be able to share information and get new prospects into your program. So I'm going to give you, before I get into that, this is another slide here that I want to share with you. The other thing, very important, that you want to do with this information is you can put responses to your questions into what we call developing a persona. And after this one in particular is called Young and Rubicam. It's a cross-culture of consumer characterization. And what it does, it allows you to take all the data that you've had in conversations with students or questionnaires and personal interviews, and you can actually come up with a picture of the typical student of that audience that are you're looking to target, just based on those answers. And we use this one. This was done by a global advertising agency that helps marketers know, like they call it the 7 different kinds of people in the world. Now, don't get hung up on the fact that we're doing like profiling or, trying to generalize about our audiences. What this does, it actually allows you to pinpoint what is important for your typical students so that you can create the right messages. And then by comparing the answers from your research to this chart that you can get online, you can get a better picture of what motivates the students. So, for example, many transitioning college students tend to be succeeders. You see them in that category. For adult education students, while many aspects have strugglers, they may also have some succeeder tendencies or even an explorer kind of characteristic. So what you do here is you look and you decide, based on the data, which 1 or 2 profiles match your audience, and you can look at your demographic trends, and that helps you narrow down kind of the picture of a typical student that you are seeing. Now, why is this important? I'm going to give you a case study here, and I want to have a shout out to our friends at the South Bay Consortium for Adult Education. This is a snapshot of their website, and they actually went through this process in gathering student data and moving forward in building a tailored outreach plan. And so I want to share a little bit about why they did this. you know, and most of you are sort of in this boat where you've developed your 3-year strategic plan, and most of your websites, when we look at that, has a lot of great information for your internal stakeholders that you're working with. It contains your plans and your minutes and who your community partners are, and a lot of planning information. And South Bay said, you know, we really can't send our students to this site and to get them excited about it. Most of them don't even know what a consortium is, nor do they even care about that. It's not something that really motivates them. So what they did is go through a lot of different surveys about their students, interviews with the transition specialist, and found that their target segment have characteristics of a typical struggler in that grid that I just shared with you, and also elements of a succeeder. So what happens then is that because they have these blended characteristics, there may be these feelings of inadequacy with the students, either language related or cognitive or both, or sometimes being overwhelmed or intimidated by the application and enrollment process when we looked at all the touch points going, you know, we had with an adult learner. But they're also goal-oriented and value security. They have a strong work ethic and better organizational skills. So we found that their typical student was a struggler moving maybe into a succeeder role. And so with that information then, we boiled it down and said, well, what really matters? Remember, when you're looking at data, it's not just the demographic, but the motivators. What really matters to a struggler going into a succeeder, kind of both of those characteristics? And what the data shows from that Rubicam chart that we shared is that these market segments will seek out organizations that are caring and protective, and they also want to be supported. So those are 3 really strong characteristics of an organization that they would be attracted to. And then also we said, however, it may be challenging to keep their focus on an end goal. The role of their transition specialists and their counselors and anybody that really interacts with students become extremely important for these market segments because these are the 3 things that they care the most. Now, what do you do with all that information? So again, we said earlier that, you know, South Bay didn't want to drive people to their consortium name because that doesn't really mean anything for adult learners. So given this what was important for their target audiences, and by the way, their target audiences span not only English speaking, but Spanish speaking, Vietnamese, and Mandarin in their particular demographic area. They came up with 4 sort of key message points that embodied care, trust, support, and all of that, which you see on the screen here. So Care South Bay opens doors for you no matter where you are in your life's journey. They felt that was really important because so many adult learners come in at different points. It's not a linear path, and they wanted to get that point across to them. Another option was Open Doors, helps you find the right path that leads to your personal and career success. Some of the adult learners just wanted to be able to help their kids better with homework, right? So, and others wanted to go into career education. So it's kind of a broader message there. Here's a third option with Trust Point, Adult Education. Our caring team is here to help open any door you want. And then lastly, True Path supports you in your educational journey no matter where your goals are. So those messages were tested. It was very interesting because the team had landed on an option, and then we said we really need to go out and see what all these market segments and all these different demographics think about these messages, which would resonate with them the most to take action. So there was a short survey that was developed for online and in the classroom and spread out across their demographics between English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, not only current students but prospective students as well. And it was very interesting because the one that everyone landed on was Open Doors. That one resonated across all market segments. But we didn't know that until we had the information. So what you see here now is the beginning of South Bay's web portal that you will go into, and it's directed into students. So they shifted their mission statement slightly, and it says our school district and community college members offer a caring and supportive environment for students on every step of their educational journey. Why did they change that? Because that's what resonated with their target audience. So you can see, and by the way, this is a mock-up of the site. That's not, it's in development, but the different, when you rotate the murals, it says we care, we support, we open doors. So everything on this is built to support the students. And it's a very different concept than pushing them to the consortium website, if you will. You can see a lot of work goes into developing a message. It's not, I would say a lot of work, but a lot of strategy goes into it. South Bay could have just sat in a room and thought of, well, this is what we think is going to resonate with the target audience. But you can see by really testing it across the demographics and getting a profile, it really helps to hone down what we call your positioning strategy within your market. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. This is an example of what works in South Bay. Some of you may be in other very different types of areas where your students are going to resonate with other things. This is an example, another positioning example of the Youth Adult Internship Program. This was a program from Mayor Bloomberg in New York, very urban area. And, you know, you can see here even the logo design itself is very urban-like. But what's important in this is going back to our Rubicam grid, what we found is that youth felt very put down in this market, that they were perceived as lazy and not as good as other students. And so we wanted to create a positioning example, this team did, and you can see the tagline is where youth get down to business, meaning if a business hires this youth population, they're going to have a population that is very motivated, and we've set the bar very high. So very different messaging strategy. This one was for the School of Career Education in Riverside, connected to the world of work. Why did they go there? And then they had another message, students love us. Well, based on research, they found that 100% of students, 100% would recommend this school to a family member. So that was very much then a message point, because that's what their student population really felt, and also connected to the world of work, meaning their instructors were very connected in to private sector with their curriculum. So hopefully that gives you some examples of, and we can pull this poll up, Veronica, as I'm taking a breath here, and just talk about, have you guys, now that we've talked about all of that, data and how important it is to have both sides, both the motivating parts in psychographic and demographic data. What data do you have on file to help you better understand your adult learners? And I would think that demographic data is going to probably pull very high here, because all of you have to have that for your annual plans and your 3-year strategic plans, and it's something that's very common. And once we get a handle on it, this is something we can probably help develop some templates and things for you all if you're missing some of these data points. Okay, and you can close the survey out, and it's true, about almost 70% of you have demographic data, but less so on the customer surveys as well as the customer focus groups. So that's something to look at, especially since many of you have this in development in terms of your plan, and about 10% of you said you had the plans. One of the things we recommend is to go back and look and say, okay, how did I come to the strategy of how I'm going to outreach to my adult learners? Is it something that I think is important, or is it something that the adult student thinks it's important? So maybe some of the things you guys can think about is upon intake, when you have say you're intaking a student, those are times to ask them questions, motivator questions, such as, how do you get your information? How would you like to get your information? What media do you consume? You can add psychographic questions in your intake form and just capture them, right, as a starting place. You can also go ahead and do some customer surveys and focus groups and things like that to get the data as a starting point using this blueprint and the Rubicam guidelines. So I'm going to stop there. Are there any questions on the data piece? Hopefully we've given you some food for thought on it's not just about demographic data. You really have to understand what motivates your adult learners to take action with you, as well as what are the barriers so you can help them overcome them.
So, Selena, this is Christine. What I find interesting with the data that you are bringing up, if I was sitting in the audience as I am right now, I'm thinking, okay, well, I have a lot of students, that are going through our programs. It's a great opportunity. Don't wait for that intake, right? When that next opportunity arises, you already have those individuals currently in the population that you're serving that you can collect this data. So you can think through the future for strategy in this outreach plan.
That's such a great point, Dr. B, and you're right. When South Bay, when they went through and did their survey to test out their names as an example, they tested it out right there in the class, in focus groups and things like that. So you're in constant contact, really, with your student population. It's not doing anything additional. It's just how are you communicating with them and what data are you collecting to help inform your outreach plan. And so taking that step would be really, really a great next step for these guys. Okay, so Alan asked a question. What is South Bay trying to accomplish? How are they tracking and measuring? Okay, Alan, we're going to put a pin in the tracking and measuring point. And what this is they're trying to engage adult learners to enroll in their programs. And they acknowledge that just having a consortium website with a lot of meetings and minutes and all of that probably isn't the right message to get across. And so, what is the right message to get to students, and how can we recruit them into the programs? So obviously one of the things we're going to be tracking is enrollments into their program, as well as where those students came from, the new students. Does your answer mean to increase enrollment? Absolutely. That is one of the key things, is to increase enrollment in specific classes, in specific areas that may not be performing, or, so it's looking at all of that. Great question, Alan. Thank you. So once that takes place, then, you want to look at, okay, you have the data, and you have now created message points. In South Bay's, it's going to be about opening doors, right? In New York, in that market, it was about where youth get down to business. Every market is a little bit different. That's why one size doesn't fit all. But when you have the messages, how do you now deploy the messages? What medium should you use? So here are some questions that we put in your blueprint to think about as you're developing the plan. Where do your target audiences congregate? So much of our work, especially with immigrants, those that do not speak English, they're out in the community in different places. Do they congregate in churches? Are they congregating at other partners within your community, some of their services, maybe wraparound services, those types of partners? And there's where you can actually go and meet them where they're at. So think about that when you're developing your plan. Where do they congregate, and how might I work with my partners to proactively deploy the messages, get messaging materials to them? What types of media do they consume? This may really surprise you, and Dr. B will talk about in the next webinar how different employers are than students in terms of the media that they consume. So, is it social media? What is it? What are the mechanisms that they use? All of that are really important to develop strategies. The other thing is, what are the touch points within your AEBG consortium members? What do we mean by that? Well, if you look at it, you may have, anywhere from 8 or more members, or some of you have less members of adult schools and community colleges, and all of your members are out there interacting with students. Where is that happening, and are all those touch points, as in the next question, standardized? So let's just say, in South Bay, we're going to do a little pilot with the transition specialists so that they all have a common intake form. They're asking the same types of questions that we can evaluate on a regular basis to help inform their plans. Also, if I have a different message about the consortium, whatever your name is that you are deploying in the community, and another partner is giving a separate message, that's an inconsistent touch point. And then if I go to the website and that's saying yet another thing, these are all the touch points you want to look at. Where am I deploying messages, and how can I get them consistent so that the community then starts to understand what is adult education, what do you do as a consortium, and how you do it, and what are the benefits for participating. The other question we'd recommend you think about in your plan is, what community events might you leverage for outreach? So certainly in the South Bay, as an example, they have lots of community events, and that's a great opportunity to go and talk to prospective adult education students with booths and materials and that type of thing. And then what tools do you need to communicate effectively? Let's say you've learned your market and maybe they're not tech savvy at all, and your best method is just to go out and meet them on the streets. So you're going to need marketing materials, some little flyers, things that have very simple, it's a very simple touch point using a marketing material or a flyer, but that might be the best strategy in your market. The point is, you don't know really until you do the research. Otherwise, there's a lot of tactics that are going on without the strategy behind it. And Dr. B, I can I call on you, Dr. B, for this, because you love talking about the difference between strategy and tactics. Can you maybe give them a couple of examples to help my point?
I think you were reading my mind there, because when I, listening, and I love this list, but when I look at what community events might you leverage for outreach, that's fantastic. But that's really tactical. That's a tactic. That's the actual, what is the action you're taking? All of that could fall short. Your intentions could be good. You could spend all this time trying to go out there, but unless you have strategy, right? What is the strategy, the what and the why you're doing this particular tactic? Then you're able to measure your outcomes, right? Because you can attach objectives to them. So you got to have the strategy first, and we all know this, right? There's a lot of sitting in a room, and there's all this big thinking going on. That's just strategy, and nothing gets done. And then you got all these people, especially all of us in education, we're such doers, and in workforce as well, and we just go out there and we've already figured it out in our heads and go, well, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do that. But what happens is there's no strategy. It's just all this effort. How do we know that we're successful? That's the how we're going about, but we forgot the what and the why we're doing it for. So do you see why strategies have to come first, and then tactics follow, and that's where then you can measure. So you can tweak and you can track.
Right. Right. And it goes back to, Alan's question, at the end of the day, increasing enrollment. Any outreach plan that you're doing and developing for no matter what target audience, what you're trying to do is attract new students or retain the students that you have in your program and help them move to different points, and those are also two different strategies. But in an outreach plan, it is to, I would say, garner more penetration in the market. So just like Coca-Cola, they bring a product to market, right? They want people to be aware of their brand. They want people to understand the product, to value it, so they'll buy more Coke, right? Well, in our world, our strategies are still built around the same premise. We want people to be aware of our organization, and I think that's where AEBG consortia really have to think through, well, what is the brand that you're out there promoting? If it's all the different individual members and they're not having a cohesive brand or message out there that's going to resonate with the target audiences, are you going to get more prospective adult learners into your program? And the answer is you may, but it's going to be dependent on how your individual members are going out there and communicating. So there's awareness. You want people to understand adult education. It's a lot more than literacy, what you're doing in AEBG, right? So how do you bring that awareness? Do they value it to the point they will engage with you as a customer? So all of these things are what you're trying to do in an outreach plan. And these are some of the things to think about as you're sort of rolling through it. And I see Alan's typing again, so hopefully he'll have another comment here as we're going through. Dr. B, anything else to add to that while Alan's typing? And I'm going to move forward to the next one.
No, but I think you said the key word that we're going to cover on next Friday's webinar, and that's the value. What is that value so they can continue for whatever reason, and from whom's perspective, right? What perspective do we see that value? And we got to be able to separate that intellectually.
Well, that's so true. And I think about, like, you know, go back to that slide where we were asking some psychographic questions. And, you know, it'd be really kind of, it's an interesting whole deal around, you know, let's say one of my barriers is, or one of my motivators is I want to get a good job. Let's just say that's it. Then I'm definitely going to be talking about that in my messaging about how AEBG or how my brand or how adult education can help solve that pain point for that customer. And you do just a great job on this, Dr. B, so we will dive into the difference between benefits and features as well.
Great.
So Alan writes, if Sacramento were to focus on branding AEBG, it could be a valuable tool for the field, kind of like a good housekeeping seal. Well, those are some great ideas, Alan, and in fact, the screenshot that I shared with you on our storytelling website is the start of branding our adult education community. So, and I think having a good housekeeping seal, right now we're just saying, you know, we're a proud partner of all of these different organizations that comprise AEBG. Because when we go to communicate the totality of our work, that's where it's really powerful. So I think they are starting that, or we are starting that through the Educate and Elevate campaign throughout. Great job on the interaction. Thank you so much. Now, no matter what your strategies are, I wanted to leave you all with three sort of key, very important points that we have found constant across the adult education market across the nation. One is when you conduct your outreach, you've got to think about removing key barriers to engagement and keeping it simple for this target audience. And what I mean by that, this is a great example. You guys have seen one of these charts. This is a career pathway that is being mapped out that makes our eyes cross, right? And you guys have mapped these out within your whole process in designing your plan. But if you give this to a student and say, okay, now this is your pathway, they can't really follow this, can they? Now another consortia that we'll shout out today is College of Sequoias, and they developed a career pathway tool online that is very simple, kind of click, and it's mobile friendly. So it starts out, do you have a high school diploma or high school equivalent? And it takes you on different branches like, yes, I do, and then what you're interested in, or no, it's just very kind of like a one-click, and here's your next step. So whatever communication you do, you cannot expect a student to follow something like this and what we do in our strategy and our planning sessions around that are programmatic. They would never be able to follow this. So how are you going to keep it simple for them? You also want to think about mobile because, especially in this market, you've got to have, you know, mobile friendly. If it's going to be electronic, everything has to be shown up on their phone. The other, number 2, is communicate benefits and not features. And again, Dr. B is going to get into this a lot in the next webinar. And tell stories, which is exactly why in this campaign that we're doing in Educate and Elevate that is going to help tell our collective story, it's such an important feature. Now, I'm going to go back to South Bay for just a moment because another strategy that they are deploying that's going to help build their Open Doors brand in their market is the whole concept. Remember, their market is very they resonate with organizations that are there to help them, support them, that are caring and supportive. Well, one of the best assets they have are all of their members and their transition specialists and counselors that work with the students. So we're actually going to feature them on this website, and we've asked each of them to share a quote about why they love working with adult learners. And they have come up with some fabulous quotes. So it's inviting, it's not threatening, it's an open environment, you know, come in at any door. They have actually their strategic plan is no wrong door. So their brand is, you know, going into open doors. So that's an asset that they're going to utilize. Now, in the campaign, we've created this for you all to tell your stories because, again, this campaign is about collective storytelling. So if you go to this link, which is at AEBG Practices with Promise, you're going to see ways to submit your different success stories. Those success stories are gold for you because they can be in your outreach plan and your marketing materials, on your website, and when you're sharing another student's challenges and then how they've overcome them through your services, you're really hitting the mark with your market here. So we have that, and again, we'd encourage you to utilize that. All of those stories are going to be on that Educate and Elevate website. And Veronica has given you the link there in the chat, so thank you for that. And this one's pretty obvious. Speak the language of the customer. Even on your website or any kind of communication tools that you are doing, you want to have visuals and everything that represent your target audience, and also that the message resonates with them within their particular language. So I leave you those kind of 3 overarching, you know, strategies for you when you're thinking about your outreach plan. Now, this is a good question. Alan had asked it earlier about measuring effectiveness. When you measure effectiveness from a communication standpoint, you're sorting for a couple of things. One is, how did you hear about us? So that's something that you want to be collecting data on all the time because your outreach plan is going to shift. Again, it's not a one and done. The market may change. You may be getting a lot of new students incoming through community events, or maybe it's word of mouth. So you want to pay attention to those and put your efforts where you're getting the most return on investment. The other thing is conversion rates. How many of those that are coming through your doors that you have outreach to that are converting into enrollments? And why are the ones that are not converting into enrollments? What are the challenges there? That would be an issue I would bring up in team meetings when you're looking at the effectiveness of your outreach plan. The other question, which is always great to ask, is what is adult education? What do you think it is? Or if you have a brand out there that you're promoting, what do you think we do? You know, what's your take on what we do here at our school? They may come up with all types of things, and that lets you know you're going to probably, if they're missing the mark on things, it's your opportunity to clarify and also look at your other larger marketing messages. Okay. So what have we done today? We've given you a roadmap. Many of you are looking at, you know, some of you have plans, some of you don't have plans. Do you have all of these 4 elements within your plan? Do you know your market? And I'm not talking just from a demographic standpoint, but also the psychographics as well. What motivates them? What are their barriers? You may also, just as an aside, in those barriers, uncover some things that you have to do from an operational perspective, not just a communications perspective as well. And that's all great because we want to continually improve. Develop and test tailored messages. So once you have that data and you have developed a profile of your typical student, what are the tailored messages? And then make sure you're testing them with students to make sure they resonate. Identifying your outreach strategies and then tying effectiveness measures into them. And Alan had one more. You might mention the quality of enrollments. So for sure, you want to take a look at where they're coming from, anything that's important for your program and your strategic plan, you're going to want to measure. Think of your outreach plan as an extension of your strategic plan. You've all developed these initiatives, these strategies and goals, right? Look at that plan and say, okay, who are the target audiences that I need to engage to bring this plan to fruition? And then developing the outreach plan is going to help you bring those target audiences to the table, whether that's a partner, another partner you need to reach, or an adult learner or an employer. So this is sort of your roadmap here, if you will. Now, what are we developing from the campaign toolkit perspective that may help you? So we're going to develop a fact sheet on what is adult education based on some of the data we've gotten so that you can take that and use it. It'll be a fact sheet that you can use, put your logo on, deploy it out in the community, have it as a handout, those types of things. So that's going to be in your toolkit. Because most of you have I think all of you have websites, we're going to provide a byline for you that connects you to the Educate and Elevate California campaign. So kind of like what Alan was talking about, your good housekeeping seal, this is going to allow you to be a partner, if you will, in the Educate and Elevate California campaign as we roll that out, and how you link to that site and have it on your website as well. We'll also be developing some state infographics that you can put on your website or use as a handout. This tool is probably going to be more effective for your partner organizations, for employers, those types of things. We're trying to give you a mix of tools for different target audiences. And then, of course, success stories, identifying them and promoting them through the AEBG Practice with Promise. So, Veronica, if we could pull up the next poll, knowing that that is what we're going to be developing, this is your opportunity to share with us what other items and tools would be helpful in developing a proactive outreach plan to target adult learners, specifically that target audience. Do you need more information on psychographic survey templates, maybe that you could use in your classroom to gather the motivators, behaviors? Maybe you need some kind of inventory guideline to help you evaluate those different touch points where you connect with adult learners among all your members. And so that you can, make those more consistently. Maybe some best practices and methods for other getting success stories. And if you have other needs, please post, as Veronica's saying, post your responses to other here, because we really want to make sure when we develop this toolkit and are rolling out this campaign that it's the information that you need to be successful within your region and also within your own organization. Dr. B, do you see anything else up there that we may be missing in our list, just hearing what we've said today that might be helpful as a toolkit item?
No, it'd be great. I see Paul has written something in the other, which is great. All of the above survey only allows one response. So I think maybe if we gave a couple seconds more for a few people, if there are other items that they would like to see in there, that they could take a moment to type that in.
I think that's really great, and while they're taking time to type that in, I think it'd be a great time, Dr. B, for you to share a little bit maybe about Business U, because we really haven't introduced your organization to the group, and you're going to be leading just an outstanding webinar next Friday at this same time. So can you tell us a little bit about Business U, kind of what the focus is there?
Well, thank you for that, Selena, and we are very excited on behalf of the team here to be delivering next Friday's webinar on business engagement, but we have it here as employer engagement, and we will learn on that webinar what's the difference, because there are two absolutely different ways of looking at employers and looking at businesses. So we're going to discuss that as well. So before we get into those topics, as you mentioned, Business U is the only institutionally accredited national organization that specifically focuses on three vertical markets: workforce, education, economic development. And it is through our professional development, technical assistance, and customer relationship management technology and tracking, et cetera, of outcomes, where we shift the cultural and operational mindset of public sector organizations. And this allows us then to more effectively engage business and industry in helping these public organizations solve the community issues. Now, this is fantastic because it results in measurable economic impact, as well as what we're all here for at the end of the day, and that is expanded opportunities for job seekers and adult learners. So that, in a nutshell, is Business U.
Well, that's really important because, you know, when I think about what we're doing with the Educate and Elevate campaign, Dr. B, it is to inform key influencers about the economic impact of adult education and why it's important. So, you know, the fact that you focus on that and really helping to share the value of adult education, you know, is going to be really important for our funding streams and, you know, helping them be able to do that, I think. So economic impact is a big, I know it's kind of a buzzword right now, but it's a big one, isn't it?
Well, it is, just like engagement is a big word, and collaboration and coordination and outreach, but the reason that we don't get to the next step sometimes is because we don't know how to go about it. And with economic impact, you know, it is quite convoluted, but there are so many tools that exist. You know, if you just Google it and you put in some pretty, you know, benign data points, you know, how many adult learners making this amount of money, and then they will be making that amount of money, you know, in a wage increase if they go through this particular training, there is a result, you know, that can come out, that you can show this, and we can talk maybe a little bit more about that with how that can be part of, you know, when you're talking to legislators. But I don't want to take any more time right now on that because you got some great results here that have come up.
We do have some great results. So it looks like our survey was only going to allow one response, so thank you for typing in some other things here. I noticed one here, specific information on workforce opportunities in the region and communication with employers would help to communicate better with students. So that's, Dr. B, definitely in your lane. You're going to be all over that next week. And a lot of you are agreeing that the tools that we have up here are of value. So we're going to add these to our list and make sure that we get these out into the field. Okay, great. Veronica, if you could go ahead and pull up the next, or the slide deck again, and we'll continue on here. And Dr. B, I'm actually going to pull up your slide because I would really love to, especially since that was in the chat box about employers and communication. Right. It's good timing here to talk about the webinar next week.
Well, that's an excellent segue. So let's do that. So let's take on that very first one. What we're going to do is look at the key findings from Business U's National Business Engagement Study, the only ones that's ever been done. And really, we're going to spend a couple minutes on that, specifically the preliminary findings that are germane to the education market segment, the one that we are all in right now. As an example, and this is just a brief data point, 100% of the educators surveyed strongly believe that business engagement pertains to building partnerships. That's really hard because before you have a partnership, you got to build the relationship, right? So we're going to focus on building that relationship so we can get to partnerships. And also we'll discuss those challenges, you know, getting there, and some of those barriers will also be discussed. We'll then move on to understand the value of strategic long-term and transformational partnerships with employers to, again, expand adult learner opportunities. We need to expand our reach, right? And we can do this with partners. This particular topic will help provide an overview of relationship development approaches that we're going to talk about, such as transactional versus transformational, as well as the differences between strategic, that Selena's been talking about all afternoon here, and tactical, right? What are those differences in our outreach efforts so we can get to our outreach plan, our blueprint, and make it effective. So that's going to be covered. We're also going to talk about how to apply the employer perspective for successful engagement. So whether you're ultimate goal is to expand opportunities with placements, right? Getting your learner customers ready for an entry point on a career pathway or a work-based learning opportunity. We all know this, that it benefits these students greatly when there are employer partnerships already established. So to achieve this, we must then engage business by articulating the value of the partnership from their perspective, not from the student's perspective, not from our perspective, right, people that are delivering whatever that is, but from the actual business perspective. And this has to happen during all interactions. So really, if I were to condense this one sentence, it would be is that we don't have to learn the language of business that everyone's always telling us we have to learn the language of business. We have our own language, right, which is pretty convoluted and very hard for some of us with all the acronyms as well. But what we have to understand is the value. You understand the language of business by understanding what is a value to a business and how to communicate that value to them. And then voila, you have the language of business. We will talk about those features and benefits that Selena mentioned a little bit about. And at the end of the day, what we're going to do is we're going to provide you with a self-assessment of your own employer business engagement activities and behaviors. And many of you are not engaging with businesses or haven't gone that route yet because it's not that you don't want to, you just are not sure how to go about it or there's no time for it. So this blueprint or this assessment that we've developed at Business U will also really help you with your outreach plan. I was looking at a lot of the questions and they can help inform how you're going to go about your outreach. There's some really great strategies and tactics in that blueprint that we will share with you. So I do hope you can join us. We're excited about it. There will definitely be some aha moments with the introduction of different lenses you can wear when it comes to your business engagement efforts. So thank you, Selena, for this opportunity to talk a little bit about it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to that one. And, just as I go through the comments in the chat feature as you were talking, Dr. B, there was one that I didn't address, and it was, if I can find it here, adult schools were branded before, California Adult Schools Learning for Life. So let's take a step back and talk about what we're doing. We're getting out of our silos here. It's not just about adult schools that we're branding and community colleges. AEBG is coming together to create a more cohesive experience for the student, no matter where they enter in, whether it's an adult school or community college or elsewhere. And so keep in mind that our work, our body of work here is around coming together. AEBG is a combination between CDE and the Chancellor's Office. And so keep that in mind. I know sometimes we come back and we think, well, it really is about just one school or one this, but our whole work is moving into a regional perspective. And the more we can collectively tell our story around what we're doing in our region, the more powerful your individual brand is going to be. So that's the whole focus behind it. I'm just looking, Dr. B, I don't see any other questions, but if you do have questions, as Veronica said earlier, our friends at SCOE are just doing an outstanding job, and they've created a contact support form. So if you have questions from this webinar or others, just make sure that you are definitely using that, and they'll deploy the questions to us as well. I think that's it. So I want to thank you all for joining, and keep your posts and comments coming in, and we'll leave it up for just a few more minutes. I'll turn it over to Neil if you're around to close. If not, I'll close Veronica.
Yes, Selena, I believe Neil he has exited the webinar. But thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar, and have a great day.